Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. So I wanted to quickly make a video talking about this particular subject and addressing it. I put a post the other day on my channel. I don't know if you saw it, but I basically took a screenshot of part of the patch notes that actually showed enemy NPC nerfs. And I mentioned that in one of my other videos, and I had a lot of people, basically some disagree. It did have a lot of reaction to it, I would say. That's the mildest way of putting it. But when I read it out and put it there, some people still like pushed back saying that these were not nerfs. You had mission nerfs. You had Pentagon, the DARPA Research Lab. They lowered the difficulty to make it on par with other missions. They also lowered Liberty Island because to make it also on par with other missions. Wall Street Stranded Tanker. So what I eventually picked out of this was, as many people had said, New York seems to be a little bit harder. And I've also noticed it too, but I've also run these missions, and have not gotten like in a bind or in a jam. I kind of run very carefully how I run them. And I noticed the enemy NPCs, they were dealing higher damage. So they already nerfed them. I think it was a damage reduction, damage output from the enemy NPCs, and that was done. Another thing too were the signature weapons against named NPCs. They slightly increased the damage of signature weapons dealing to that it dealt to named NPCs, and I've also noticed the difference in that as well. I know many people have disagreed, but I'm like, have you tested it? And it didn't seem like a lot of people tested it as well. And the reason this stood out to me was because I've been trying to make a tip of the spare build, and the gear set's weird. Honestly, they can design it better, but I don't know. I think they're afraid that it will get out of hand because players can get super creative with that. But I've noticed, if you even watch some of my my videos, my clips, I'm using my signature weapons, and they are literally taking out some NPCs, like chewing health out. Named and even unnamed, those NPCs took a lot of damage from them, but the named ones, I've seen a significant damage change. It's not over the top, but it is good. Now, signature weapons to me need to be much stronger. I've said that many times, and I enjoy my survivalist crossbow like many people, and I think that that's something that needs to also work. The patch notes also say that there's also reduced damage elite NPCs can deal to player skills. If you look at this is pretty good, especially in Legendary and Heroics, where enemy NPCs are very intuitive. They'll hit your drone and melt it instantly. They'll take out your turrets. They'll take out all those kinds of other things. That's pretty good, especially for skill players. I would have thought the skill players would be excited about this, but it just seemed like the focus was on other things. But this is something that somebody like me, I've been wanting to work with the assault drone for a long time without having too much problems as a skill player. Now I see something like this and I'm like, definitely the assault drone just got viable if this is something that the damage is significantly reduced enough where I can run, something like that. And then also remember the Motherly Love gloves, which is something that they didn't put in the patch notes, which used to grant you 20% skill health, has been reduced by 10%. So as a tank, you have also been scaled appropriately. So if you were using your Motherly Love gloves, there is also a damage here that I think should scale with it. So if you look at this from the perspective of where I was looking at it from, I think that there are a lot of different pointers there that show that these enemy nerfs do, they do significantly impact specific aspects of the game. They may be niche, but once you start adding up all of them together, I think the big picture is the enemy NPCs did get a significant, tweak. It may not have been the nerf that everyone is discussing, which is straight up enemy health and damage output overall, but there are enemy, damage outputs here and health changes that do impact certain aspects of the game. What I think the developers are doing, and I will sound like an apologist, but hey, I'll say what I feel is correct, regardless of what anybody thinks, is that they're making these changes in very small increments to not go overly swing the hammer on the nerf, and then we revert back to patch 1.7. If you go to patch 1.7 and look at comments under many YouTube videos, and dear YouTubers, you gotta help me out on this one. I know y'all listen to my videos and you're seeing how I'm getting a lot of flack from the community. Your comment sections were filled with people saying There is nothing to do. The game is easy. The game is boring. And you gotta help a brother out. I was reading comments on y'all's videos, and that's what people were saying consistently. And I just, it really wore me out because that's the way the community felt. And yes, there were people who enjoyed the game and were playing it, but there was also a lot of people saying it just was too easy and you could steamroll through missions with any gear and all. But now we're just in a place where, that has been changed, but I think it still needs refinement and it needs work. And this is where the developers are kind of pushing this. So the next one is tank sprint speed. Now, if you played Stranded Tanker, when they said this, a lot of people said, nah, man, enemy NPCs are still running and sprinting. The patch notes didn't say all NPCs. It said tank sprint speed. Stranded Tanker was the culprit here. I remember playing that mission to try to get my holster, the Imperial Dynasty holster, and a lot of, troubles that we faced was the aspect where you get 6 to it felt like 9. And if you ran around there on heroic, they would chase you down. By the time you turned around, they were like right behind you. And they were, that needed to be tuned for that mission to actually be able to, come and scale in line. And then other missions that also had tanks that would chase you around. If you play Roosevelt Island, this is not just New York missions. You get to that place where, you have the elite guard for Emily and Shaw. Depending on heroic or whatever you were playing, you could have multiple spawn based on RNG. They would chase you all over the place. And so nerfing their speed allows for you to be able to burst them down. It's not like we don't have damage, to do that, but they just kind of close down the gap on you too much, and then you can't really burst them down. And if you're solo, it's crazy. You're trying to do everything by yourself. These guys don't need to be a problem. They need to show that animation that they're wearing heavy armor. And so I think this was a very, as crazy as it sounds to say it, I think it was a very smart move on their part to kind of make the game kind of come in line for now in a minimal change, but not go make the game super easy. And then NPC Shotguns. This one, I cannot believe some of the comments I read. Some people said, oh, it's just a niche. Whereas everybody knew that those hyena shotgunners that will be literally sidearm pump action in you was a problem. It was widely known. I mean, like literally, those guys will hit you from anywhere and basically melt you. It was terrible. And so they reduced the damage of all NPC shotguns. That is not only the damage of those hyena side guys that are just doing their shotgun stuff. That's also Rikers. That's also even what are their name? The True Sons heavies. If you break their backpack, their grenade launcher, they switch to a shotgun. And that shotgun has made me wipe a heroic before. Believe it or not, I was doing a heroic solo. I did not realize that this guy's shotgun was going to be hitting that hard, and boom, just took me out. So adjusted the range of some NPC shotguns, including shotguns used by Black Tusk rushers. Those are very strong, especially in heroic. Those shotguns are KSG shotguns hitting for 1 mil, and they can literally snipe you from it, in the way that it is. So those nerfs are significant. The game works like that. Now, yes, SMGs from enemy NPCs, assault rifles, LMGs, those weren't nerfed, but those enemy NPCs, we can usually take them down from a longer distance. If they need to be tuned or nerfed, maybe down the road, that's something that can happen, but this is where we are right now. And then they also reduce the duration of poison and cleaners, napalm, and snare when it's applied to players. Now, I don't stay long enough if I see any grenade coming, I don't try to guess which it is. I just duck. I just run out of the way. So I guess in testing, some people have said, yeah, I noticed that I can stay alive, but a lot of people have been running hazard protection too because of the experiment. I made a build about it a while ago. What's his name? Identity made a build about it a while ago as well, and many people have known before. I'm not saying that we were the first to talk about it. I'm just saying it was widely known that these items were actually done, in a way that they supported you the way that you played. So that's something that a lot of players have been, working with. And so now that that's also even been nerfed, well, guess what? You can kind of take that out of your build because, hazard protection items, if you're playing against, cleaners and poison, depending on who's shooting poison at you, and you can kind of add more damage to your build and all of that. And then special ammo signaling, any NPC with special ammo has the same UI indication as from the special ammo directive. Examples of this is outcast will pick up special ammo, blah, blah, blah. They have an indicator so you know this guy's about to hit you with a shock. And I've noticed that that's a thing. That's basically not a nerf. That's just a UI change that needed to be there. And, you know, the game should have been able to kind of say that guy is dangerous, hide from him in the onset. So not just like, surprise, I should shot you with the, you know, with the flaming bullet and now you're dead. You know, that was just unacceptable. They should have had the indicator there, because I remember what's his name, Drew, talked about indicators before Title Update 8 was released. He talked about how you're going to be seeing more indicators with the Rikers. Somebody should have thought about indicators as well with these enemy NPC types. Now, let's talk about armor. Let's talk about enemy NPC damage output. Let's talk about enemy armor. Right now, I think enemy NPCs are in their health and their armor, I think, are in a good place. You can take them down with decent damage. I have trashy builds and I can take them down. There are people with optimized builds and have been saying that it's easier to take them down, but their damage output towards you as the player, that's where the problem is. But not only is the problem just there, the problem is there because people who stack high armor do not feel the impact. And that's where the big problem is when it comes to enemy changes. I don't know what the programming is. I think, in my opinion, if there's a way they're going to tweak it, when armor is a factor, when your armor reaches a certain level, and I may have said this before, it needs to interact with the enemy damage in a different way. Perhaps using, what is the opposite of multiplicative? I know it's divide. I'm not saying what I'm talking, but maybe a divisive type of measure or mathematical factor that allows for that damage once it hits you to then be reduced at a significant amount because you have reached a specific armor threshold. They can keep the armor threshold secret, but that way I think somebody who owns somewhere around 1 million armor will now understand, okay, I have 1 million armor. So if you don't have 1 million armor, you maybe can be working towards that, or understand, I don't have 1 million armor, so I'm just a sitting duck, so I have to be wary about how I use cover. But I have 1 million armor, then I have to play in a way where I don't feel too much at risk. I can be sitting in armor at 1.5 million armor, and the guy that has 400,000 armor is also sitting in cover. All of us afraid of of being melted by enemy NPCs. This is probably the kind of nerf people are talking about. And I think it needs to be done in that way, that's separated for people who have high armor, and people who have low armor should know that they have low armor. If you go nerf enemy damage output in general, we're going to revert to patch 1.7. The game's going to get easy. You're going to be face tanking like Division 1. If you want to face tank, that's at the end of life of the game. I think we're probably going to get there. But at the same time, what should difficulty look like in the game? This is a big, broad question. There are 4 levels of difficulty in this game. And I think that's where it's actually thrown a lot of people off. The difficulty scaling is where people are asking, shouldn't normal be twice as hard as, hard? Shouldn't hard be twice as hard as normal? Shouldn't challenging be twice as hard as hard? And shouldn't heroic be twice as hard as challenging? These questions are, very significant questions. I came up with a formula where I said, if you beat something on normal in X minutes, it should be twice as much. That was kind of the calculation I came up with. And when we looked at it, it made sense. I can beat a heroic mission in 7 minutes, Grand Washington Hotel on heroic solo. So that means, in my head, if I do it divided by 4, the amount of difficulty levels, I can do challenging in, the factor of 7 minutes less. So that'll be 21 minutes. I should be able to do challenging. Now, I know some of you have told me you do challenging in 11 minutes or 15 minutes. Well, good. But heroic is where I'm starting my baseline from, the hardest content in the game. If it takes me this long to do it based on my player skill level, then I think it should take me, twice or half as long for the middle ground, if you understand what I mean. I don't know if you get it. The math is on the screen. Now, some of you, it takes you much less to do your heroic missions. It doesn't take you 28 minutes. It takes you much less, and that's good. And it'll probably be taking you much less as the difficulty levels go down based on accuracy and based on your build and your play style. So these are questions that are much more important than just going to nerf everything. Because like I said earlier in the video, content creators, if you're watching this video, please give a guy a hand. If this game gets easy, you know that no one is going to want to play the game, and it's just going to be droning and groaning on how the game is now too easy. So the conversation is more complex. I'm trying to look at the conversation from not just a surface level, but from a perspective where it's like, okay, if this is the problem, how can, we go about it, without having to ruin the entire game? And it's crazy because this is something that Massive should have done in testing. But like we all have come to this conclusion, it doesn't seem like they're testing their game, because if they did, this would have been a question that they would have easily answered by doing a little bit of math. And honestly, if they'd even done the math, I think they could have explained that. But they don't even have this explanation that I've given you. If they had it, they would have given it, because it makes, I think, to me, in my own opinion, it makes sense. If you understand what I mean. But I don't think they have it. And that is evidence that, to me anyways, that they're not testing their game and they're not looking at these numbers. Now, maybe they are. Maybe they're testing their game and they just don't want to say anything. But it's also at the same time driving the community crazy. Whew. This game is one of the most difficult things I have ever encountered in my life. But I'll keep my position. I'll look at the positives. I'll talk about the areas that need strengthening. And I'll do my critiquing. But I'm not just going to sit there and say the game is trash, the devs are trash. Like I always say, it's easy to make a negative video, but it's very difficult to find possible solutions to solve the problems. I'm trying. I have no experience with programming. I have very minimal experience as a gamer, honestly, compared to some other people. But I think if these tweaks continue to be made, and if they're looking at this from a complex level, the game's going to get to a very good place. It's not going to take a day. I know many people are saying it's been 3 years. It's just a different team and a largely different game. And I think maybe a huge cultural shift that brought Division 2. It is not like Division 1, and which is sadly the case, but it's what we got. So I guess that's it for me. Thank you so much for your time and audience.